I'd like to welcome you once again to And That Settles It. And I have a short poem that I want to read tonight called Draw Me Nigh. Then we're going to be looking a little bit at the book of Job, and for a short word from Job. Some of the poems that I write, I have written out of desire to be closer to God, and this is one such poem. A lot of the writings and the desire comes from the fact that I realize how short I fall. So this one comes from that place where I realize how short I fall, and I have an understanding that God is the answer, and I thank the Lord I thank Him that I do have that understanding to know that He is the answer. Draw my heart nigh unto you, Lord. If it has to bleed, please don't let it die. For mercy's sake I plead my case, for you to draw me nigh. Enemies around me surround me with lies. I've sinned enough of my own. I'm unable to disguise before your all-seeing eyes all the truth of me. So mercy is my plea. Let every man be a liar, but you, Lord, are true. I'm pleading for your mercy and trusting it to you. Draw me nigh, Lord, draw me nigh. I understand that we live in a fallen world, and I'm a part of that fallen world. And in Christ, I am a child of God. In Him, I am a saint, though certainly a sinner by birth, and still struggle with sin in my life. But I know that I'm a saint by the grace of God. And as a Christian, I know that I am surrounded by the thoughts of the world and the views of the world, the worldly worldview. I'm surrounded by it, and all Christians are on this earth. But God would have us to have a different worldview. He would have us to have a worldview that honors Him, a godly worldview, and He is able to give us that. And I want to read from Job here. I'll need this in a minute, but bear with me here in my usual clumsy self here. But we're going to go to the 39th chapter. But before I read, I want to give just a little bit about Job, because we're only going to read a few verses. It's not my point here to do a detailed study in the book of Job. That would take a long time. But I have done that before, and Job is an awesome book. And it's more than just a book about a man who had some struggles, even though he was righteous, and how that he got through it. It's a book that God allowed us to have. God allowed this man to go through this to benefit many, many, many people. And only the Lord knows how many people have really benefited from not just the book of Job, but the man's very life. Because if it wasn't for his life, we wouldn't have the book of Job. So it was an awesome work that God did in and through Job. Job starts with a little meeting in heaven, if you will, and Satan is there, and God says to Satan, "Consider my servant Job." And that's the beginning of Job. And I'm going to challenge you to get in there and read it and study it out. Never take a preacher's word for it. Go in there and read it and study it out. Satan is given permission of God to do any harm to Job. He can't kill him, but he can do harm to him, harm to his family, which he does. Job loses his children. He loses his livestock. He loses pretty much everything. And even his wife at one point says, "Job, curse God and die." So everything happened so fast in all of this that here is a man who was doing very well and very blessed of God, a very righteous man, and just boom, boom, boom. Now he's down to nothing. He's lost everything in one day, and he's stricken with boils. He's in agony. So he's sitting in sackcloth and ashes. If you want to know what that is, get interested enough to do a little study and find out. And you can find out what sackcloth and ashes is. Job's sitting in them, and he's scraping himself with shards. You want to know what that is? Look it up. You can figure it out. And I'll let you know it's not very comfortable, but it was a way to relieve a little bit of all the pain and the itch and all that goes with having boils break out all over you. Now, so there he is. Job has 3 friends, and they are men that were well-to-do and pretty wise fellas. They come to visit Job, and what they give Job is an earful of how that, Job, your sin is why you're struggling so much. Your sin is what's wrong. When Job answers them and says that he honestly can't see any sin, then they really let him have it. Let him know, hey, you think you're better than God. If you want to know about that, get in there and read it. It won't take you no time. It's a few chapters. Read it and find out what these 3 fellows have to say. You've got Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite, and then the last fellow to speak to Job before God speaks to him, which we're going to get to in a minute, is he had some better things to say than the rest in a way. He was a young fella. He was a young Elihu, if I'm saying that right. And he gives good answers, though incomplete information and a lack of understanding. He gave Job some good answers. But like a lot of good answers that we can have, good answers without revelation, good answers without some insight to them, don't really mean a lot. Sometimes they will hurt you more than help you. Though they'll almost condemn you more than anything else. A good answer to life's problems without the ability to really let that answer work in you. So here is Job, and he's dealt with his friends, which I believe they were his friends. I believe that they really hurt for Job, but they really were not right in their talking with Job. Now, it's God's turn to talk to Job, and I really love this. You might think you don't believe in God. Well, here's God telling us he talked to Job in the book of Job, letting us know that. You might think you don't believe in the devil. You're going to find out that the book of Job doesn't just talk about the devil as a maybe, but really talks about him as active and doing something and being real. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I'm going to read starting at chapter 40. The Lord said to Job, oh, and by the way, the end of the book is a blessing. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that before I read this, because we're going to dwell on just a few verses here. The end of Job is restored and has a blessed rest of his life. The Lord said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. Then Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's? And can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor, and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. I want to stop just for a second, and it just astounds me that here's Job, and he's dealt with his friends, and now he's listening. God's talking to him through the storm. I do not really know if that's a physical storm. I know in my New King James Version that I read, it talks about through the whirlwind. Was God speaking out of the clouds? And he very well could have been. Could he have been talking about the storm of all that Job was going through? I don't really know the answer to that, but I do know that God spoke to Job and spoke to him in such a way that Job knew it was God, and in such a way that Job was able to speak back, and I think much more than just in a prayer kind of way when we pray and have faith. I believe that they had a communication going audible, and I think that is awesome. Brace yourself like a man, I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's? Can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor, and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at every proud man and bring him low. Look at every proud man and humble him. I want to stop and let you know the Bible teaches plainly that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. The Bible teaches that no man can come to the Son unless the Father draw him. And I want you to know that God does a work in mankind, and he is the reason that people do and are able to come into fellowship with him. He is the one that's able to humble a heart. He has not created us puppets and robots. He does not make us wind up toys. We're not like that with God. But God, even in our sinful state, he reaches down, and he is the one that can bend us and yield us and bring us and help us and give us pliable hearts that we can open up, that we can even attempt to open up to him. God is the one who does that. And at best, we can help each other, and we can give good counsel, and we can lead in a good direction, and we can lead somebody to Christ, and that's a wonderful thing. But we need to understand that when we're doing all of that, we need to be in prayer and know that it's really God is the one who is working that work. So God is asking Job, can you do these things, Job? And Job knows the answer to that. But God is saying asking him, can you do these things? But here he says something in a second here that's just, to me, that is just really amazing. Look at every proud man and humble him. Crush the wicked where they stand. And God does that. He can do that. He will do that. The day is coming when the wicked will be no more. They will be no more in the sense of able to affect the righteous. They will be no more in the sense of being in a position to even think they can oppose God. They will be in eternity separated from God. And God is the one who can do that. So he's asking Job, Job, can you do that? Now Job knew the answer to that. Number one, man cannot do that to man because man is no better than man. But God is, and he not only can, but he is going to do that. That's going to be done. Bury them all in the dust together, shroud their faces in the grave. And I myself, now listen, this is what amazes me. This is verse 14. This is what caught my attention. I was doing my Bible reading the other morning, day before yesterday morning. And this touched me so much that I circled it. That's why I'm speaking on it tonight. God says to Job, then I myself will admit to you that your own right hand can save you. God isn't saying to Job, Job, you tell me out of your mouth that you can do the things that only I can do. God is saying to Job, Job, you show me that you can do the things that I can do. And when you show me that and I'm satisfied with what I see, then I will tell you, I'll be the one to tell you. I'll admit to you that your own right hand can save you. You know, there was a man named Enoch, and I'm not going to go there to show you where it's at, but look it up. A man named Enoch, and God was so loved this man. This man walked such a walk with God that God chose to actually take him out of this world. He did not die the way we die. He's one of two men in the Bible that actually did not die, and God took them up. Elijah the prophet was one, and then Enoch was one. Here is a very righteous man named Job. God didn't choose to take Job up. God chose to use Job as an example for us on what God could do in his life, even in suffering. And this is why we have the book of Job. And God says to Job, show me you can do what only I can do. This is a message to us today. This righteous man could not do what only God can do. He could not save himself, not from the boils, not from all the heat the devil put on him. He could not save himself from the despair of losing his family. He could not save himself from any of that. But God could save him from that. And God did save him from that. Job is with God today. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. Job is a blessed today. Now, in the beginning of Job, we read about Satan, who was in the presence of God. Do you know God gave this answer to Job and said, Job, you show me that you can do what only I can do, and then I will admit to you, hey, you can do it. You can do it. You know, most people don't even try to do that. There might be a few that in their insanity might think that they can do only what God can do. But there is one who does and will never change, not since he fell, and he's the one that you read about in the beginning of Job, who was in the presence of God, whom God said, have you considered my servant Job? Here's somebody who thinks he can do what only God can do. And it's impossible, because only God is God. Only God can do what God can do. And when in separation from God, we're separated from the filling of him and the presence of him. We're going to stay separated until Christ comes in, until we come to know Christ. And this is why Jesus died on the cross, so that we could have that fellowship with God. But I want to mention to you that Satan is always trying to be God. And he misleads, and he misleads, and he misguides, and he will blind eyes. And in this day and age, which really in so many ways is no different than it's been since sin came into the world, and yet in some ways it's so much more magnified and intense because we have media and sources where we can see everything that's happening all at once, so it can get much more intense. That devil is so at work. He will have you, he will help stir your emotions, he will have you believing that through your efforts you can save yourself or you can save the world. And brothers and sisters, the world is not going to be saved. I believe that it is a wonderful thing to stand up for what's right, and we need to. We need to speak up against injustice. We need to do that with love. But Christians, we need to do that with the understanding that this world is never going to fix itself, and it cannot fix itself, no more than the devil can fix himself, no more than Job could fix himself. But we need to trust in the Lord, because he has taken us to a place where it's all going to be fixed, and where Christians are going to be with him for eternity. And that, my friends, is in the scripture. and read the book. Get in here and study it. And if you hear things that I say that bother you, I understand that could be, and I'm not perfect. I may misspeak, or I may say things in a way that doesn't come across right. I pray and hope that I speak in love, but I may fall short there too. Don't take a preacher's word for it. Get into the Bible. Go to church and listen to good preaching. It's by the preaching of the Word that God draws you to Himself. So I pray that my preaching will draw you to Christ. But get in and study the Bible, and then ask your heart. Ask yourself, are you right with God? And if you find yourself being filled with all of this thing where you're just kind of patting yourself on the back and say, oh yeah, I do this right and that right and this right and that right, then you just kick that to the curb, and you look at the Word that teaches all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And then believe Jesus. Believe that He died on the cross for you. And in that, I'm going to give you a good old Scottish blessing that if you've listened to me before, you've heard it. Lang may your loom reek. May your chimney be always smoke. May your house be filled, warmed. May your life be full. And until the next time, that settles it. And see you soon.